Welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to start reviewing the Zettelkasten, or the main cards. This is the main part where the information that you're going to gather, whether it's from books, research, lectures, videos, is going to reside. It's the things that you're going to be thumbing through and looking through the most often that will attract those sparks of inspiration, or those neural explosions as I call them, and give you what you need for your ultimate objective, whether that's writing an article, writing a book, preparing a presentation, working on a dissertation like I am, or simply gathering knowledge for your own sake for some future objective down the road. So with that, let's get back to my desktop and we'll start taking a look at the Zettelkasten, or main cards. Okay, so the Zettelkasten cards are a little bit different than all of the other boxes. So we had, the index box with its A to Z tabs, the bibliography box with its A to Z tabs, and the terms, concepts, and theories box with its A to Z tabs. The Zettelkasten box is actually a collection of 5 other boxes, each of which contains within it several tabs and numerical segments based on the academic discipline that they fall under. The first card that we're going to look at is in social services because it starts with a 20 number. And we're going to go ahead and look at sociology here. And you can see here's my actual Zettelkasten, or main card. The address is what I've actually named the card. In Scott Scheper's book, the Antinet Zettelkasten, he has the address located over here on the right-hand side, like this, if you can see that. I have opted to use it to name the card instead of the topic or concept because I wanted to be able to easily differentiate my Zettelkasten cards from index cards. At the same time, I wanted to make sure I tied that number to its overarching academic discipline. And so I can see here that this number is tied to cultural sociology. And that actually makes sense if you look at the title of the card, or the main concept for this card, which is cultural influences on ethical leadership. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Control E again to hide the coding so it's a little easier for you to see and to read. So if I were doing these on a physical card, this would be what I wrote at the top of the card, and this is what I would have written on the right-hand corner of the card as my address. But for the digital platform, I had to do a little bit of rearranging because I was restricted in how I could lay things out. And then here's the text of my thoughts, specifically as they pertain to cultural influences on ethical leadership. This is a rough draft that I could literally pick up and put into another article, my dissertation, in the text of a book, whatever the case may be, where I want to talk about those cultural influences on ethical leadership. The important thing to note when you write out your cards is that you need to be able to understand them long after the context has been forgotten. Now, I know that I got this information from a research article on Zhang, and I can, use Control H and kind of hover and see, okay, I got cultural influences on ethical leadership because it was part of an overall research paper on ethical leadership in multinational companies' control practices, okay? So I'm not as likely to forget the context of where this content came from because I do have it cross-referenced. But the point is that this needs to be the equivalent of your rough draft. Obviously, I would tweak this, make it flow more smoothly if I were to put it into an article or a paper. If we go ahead and close up our tab, close up our social science box, and go into our applied science, and let's go into 503, which is business. And you can see here that I have 3 cards in sequential order. So the first card is .000. That's how I like to start off my cards. Sometimes I forget to do 3 zeros and I'll start off with a 1. Doesn't really matter. It's just an address to keep the cards in the order that I want them to be in. Again, the address is here. It ties to business ethics here, and I can see that by my see also reference that this particular business ethics is tied to, or ethics is tied to business opposed to philosophy. And I'm putting in a description of ethical leadership. And this is a description of ethical leadership specifically as it pertains to a business environment. Now, obviously, ethical leadership could apply to any number of different situations. But for my research purposes, this is talking about ethical leadership in a corporate world. And so, again, my text here is written in my own words as I would write it in the midst of a paper for academic purposes, a publication for an article, or anything of that nature. The second card in order is on the same overall concept in that it's talking about business ethics, but here it's talking about the 4 normative peculiarities of ethical leadership. And as you can see, this is one of those cards where I'm at 279 words. Okay, I went a little bit over. But that's okay because I have this continue here, and I have, these here. But for the most part, I've stayed within my limit of a card. So I had to continue. There was more information on this than I could fit on one card. So I created a second card. Sometimes I give it the same number with a continuation. Sometimes if I suspect that it's going to go into more than 2 cards, I'll just start numbering them sequentially and use the word CONT to represent that it's a continuation of another card. Another thing that I do to indicate that it's a continuation of a card is I don't put in the title. I keep the title only on the first card, and then I just have the content flow from the second card. This is how I've set it up for me. You can set it up any number of ways that works for you. Some people prefer to use an alphanumeric method where maybe they would have, 5030400.1, and then the second card would be maybe an A or a B or a C, whatever. There's all sorts of different ways that you can provide the addresses for your cards, and Scott Scheper goes through those in his book, Antinet Zettelkasten. I set it up this way because my brain just thinks a little bit logically, and I like to have things kind of in order and be consistent. And also, I think that this shows you why I have all of the academic disciplines as options within my Zettelkasten boxes, because artificial intelligence, strategic planning, and corporate governance can all fall into different academic disciplines depending on the focus and what it's talking about. All right, let's go ahead and close that tab, and I'd like to move down to 511, which is our systems science. And here you can see I have a card on control theory, but this is specifically pertaining to control between headquarters and subsidiaries. And again, this is written out, and you can see down here that I've actually linked to 2 other cards, formal control and informal control. Now here's an example where I could have just created a second card and talked about those control theories as part of the overall, but I opted instead to break these cards out because they're very prominent, distinct types of control. And I felt it was important to be able to use those cards collectively as well as independently of one another. Again, it's important to remember that it's the quality of the content that you put on the card, not necessarily the quantity, although over time quantity will achieve a level of critical mass where it becomes extremely useful for meeting a variety of final objectives, especially if each card is written in such a way that it can stand alone once the context has been forgotten. Okay, so let's go ahead and close up these tabs, and close up my boxes. So you can see again that I'm following a very linear analog process and how I move in and out of those files. Next, let's talk about how to determine what goes on a card, that value. And with that, I'm going to take you to a matrix that I have. So if you look here, you can see that I have a matrix. This is my card value matrix. So down here in the lower left-hand corner, we're saying that the information is not practical nor useful, so not necessary for the current objective or any future ones. There's a lot of things that I will highlight within a book, an article, that after the second or third look through, I'll decide, you know what, yeah, that was interesting, but it's really not practical or useful, and so I can ignore that information as just something that piqued my interest but isn't really relevant to a final objective. And then we have practical and useful information, but not necessarily new or applicable to the current objective, or novel but not necessarily practical or useful to the current objective, but could be in the future. So sometimes we have information that's useful, but it's common knowledge. It's something that people could either find easily, or it's nothing real, I guess, inspirational, for lack of a better word, versus something that is new, but you don't really know how to apply that new knowledge. It's kind of an outlier, something that's interesting, that you might be able to use it in the future, but you're not really sure how. And then there's this sweet spot of being new and applicable to the current objective, and it induces a state of excitement. This is the goosebump excitement where you get that adrenaline rush and that dopamine hit, and you're like ready to just write about whatever it was that resulted in that spark of inspiration or that neural explosion. But now that we know what the value of the card is, how do you know which value goes to which type of card? And that brings us to the card type matrix. So the card type matrix has the same quadrants as the card value, and that pretty much ties to which card it should fall under. So here, it was not new, it was not applicable, it was something that maybe we highlighted but decided we didn't really need to do anything with. You can go ahead and cross it off the list. No sense wasting any more time on this particular key takeaway. This is a good observation with some applicability. Keep it on the bib card for this. So I have things that I have noted on the bib card that I don't, in the objective section, that I don't necessarily put down in the key takeaway section. Something that caught my eye, it might be something I want to expand on later, but I may not, because it is kind of a common knowledge thing, nothing really new there. It might be applicable to what I am studying, but doesn't necessarily need a card for me to be able to use that information. Something that is a novel idea but not currently applicable, that usually falls, for me at least, in my terms, concept, or theory cards, because I can revisit it again. I might come across something in an article that I've never heard of, so it's new, but I'm not really sure how it would fit into the scheme of things. An example of that is the theory that we had looked at earlier, the adaptive structuration theory, that was a framework that aided in understanding the interplay between technology and social processes within organizations. It's a theory. It was kind of interesting to read. Not really new. Is it applicable to my overall objective of a dissertation on artificial intelligence, strategic planning, and corporate implementation? I don't know. It might be, but it might not be. And so That's the type of card that I put in that term, concept, and theories box. Something that I can reference and use again at any point if I want to, but I don't have to. It's not necessarily critical. And then the sweet spot is something that is new and applicable. It's best for a research card to use to draft your final objective. This is your Zet. This is the Zettelkasten card, the main card, the one that is your spark of inspiration, your neural explosion, that you want to write everything down in your own words so that you have a rough draft that can stand alone on its own context and be used in the future in any number of final objectives. So I hope that helped explain the Zettelkasten cards and the main cards. I hope that having those matrix can help you determine what the value is and how that value then translates to what card to use and where to put that information. One of the things you probably noticed is that the index card isn't mentioned as a card option. I have either bibliography cards, Zettelkasten cards, or my term, concept, and theories cards. And that's because the index is tied to every single Zet card that is made simply by the nature of the number and the table of academic discipline, at least within my system, because that's the keyword that I'm using to file those. And so everything gets crossed into the index at some point. So if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments below and I will try to answer them in a future video. Until next time, I hope you found this helpful. In our next video, we're going to talk about the templates that I created that are within the specific Zettelkasten vault. And the video following that, we will talk about my project, my work in process box, and what that includes. And hopefully we should be wrapping things up here soon within the next few videos so that you are all set to use your Zettelkasten vault and to begin your own card collection. Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.